Adolf Hitler was a boy born on April 20th, 1888. His father, Alois Hitler, was the illegitimate son of Maria Schickel-Gruber and another man, who may have, ironically, been a Jew. Adolf Hitler was the fourth child out of 7, if you count the ones that died. Despite his father's wishes, Hitler wanted to become an artist. So Hitler left home to go to Vienna to apply for an art school, but he failed twice. It was there in Vienna that he acquired his hate for the Jews, and so he joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis. After seizing power of the Nazi Party, he attempted to seize power over all of Germany. He organized a battle league within the Nazis and attacked the beer hall in Munich. The attack was a failure, however, and Hitler was arrested. Unfortunately, even the judges were sympathetic to Hitler's cause. Instead of receiving 5 years in prison, he only received 9 months. Germany was currently suffering from hyperinflation. The price of just one egg had risen to 30 million times its normal cost. Adolf Hitler took advantage of this time. He wrote his book Mein Kampf while in jail, and he blamed all the Jews. He wrote that Jews were responsible for all problems and evils in the world, including Germany's defeat during the First World War. They were Germany's true enemy, and they had no culture of their own, but they perverted existing cultures with their parasitism. They were not a race, but an anti-race. It may have been poorly written, but Mein Kampf drew a responsive chord between those who believed that Germany's true destiny was world domination. Those were mostly the ones who hated Jews. The Nazis became the strongest party in 1932, and Hitler was offered many positions in the cabinet, though he accepted none that did not make him chancellor. Many knew of Hitler's intentions, and they did not want to give Hitler the place of chancellor, Paul von Hindenburg, the president, included. However, he was eventually convinced by his friends and family, and when Paul von Hindenburg died, Hitler became the new leader, and his rise to power was complete. He was free to persecute the Jews, free to take over lands, and free to create the master race. Under Hitler's rule, vice-like grip on Germany, life, if anyone would call it living, was brutal and held no mercy towards Jews, gypsies, the disabled, and all the others the Nazis saw unfit. It began with Jews being unfairly fired from various jobs, such as government jobs and artist jobs, the sign stating "Jews Not Wanted" turning up at the entrances of numerous public places. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were passed by Hitler's government. These laws deprived the Jews of their citizen rights. The Jews were forced to wear the Star of David and live in a special section of cities, a ghetto basically. The ghettos were unhealthy, cramped, dirty, and there was little food. Numerous Jews died due to starvation, disease, and even suicide. Even though the death count was high, many Jews chose to live as well as they could possibly manage. They secretly held plays, worshipped, prayed, did schoolwork, and even tried to govern themselves. They still had hope in their hearts. Some were even bold enough to rebel. There were fairly large resistances in the ghettos, actually. When Hitler's reign of terror began, resistance activism was low. Fear and panic had gripped the world. However, as World War II continued to rage on ferociously, several resistance groups began to form, and most Allied nations began their own opposition. The French and Danish resistances grew as during the war's 6 years, and organized large movements such as strikes. Within Germany, the White Rose had been founded by siblings Hans and Sophia Scholl and their friend Christoph Probst. It was consisted primarily of college students who had used forms of peaceful protests to bring down the Nazi regime. Resistance members were in constant danger of being caught by the Gestapo and therefore had to be extremely careful when communicating with others. Several of them created fake identities. Each resistance group had its own way of expressing its feelings towards the Nazis. Some groups, such as the White Rose, chose to participate non-violently by distributing legal newspapers describing the horrors of the Nazi regime or passing out leaflets. Other groups put up posters around town. This poster used by the Polish resistance is German for Germany kaputt. In Germany occupied Soviet Union, this poster encouraged resistance fighters to beat the enemy mercilessly. Dutch resistance groups like the Color of Freedom provided shelter and support for Jews in hiding and offered assistance to Allied forces. Meanwhile, the French and Norwegian resistance organizations delayed the German invasion of Normandy and kept Germany from making atomic bombs. Perhaps the most effective resistance group was the Yugoslavian partisans, who almost single-handedly drove the Germans out of their country in 1944. Jewish resistance took place mostly in the ghettos. However, most of these uprisings were unsuccessful because the Jews were not armed and often shot and killed. The most famous Jewish uprising was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943. Organized for months, the Jews were still no match for the German guns, and 7,000 people were killed, while 56 other Jews were captured and shipped off to concentration camps. However, some Jews were able to escape and join the Polish uprising. By the end of World War II, several members of the resistance had been captured and tortured by the Gestapo. Most of the members of the White Rose were executed. However, the fighters who lived switched to rebuilding process that followed the war. They became involved in politics, and the partisans of Yugoslavia became a foundation for their nation's government. Today, members of the resistance are recognized as heroes for fighting for a cause they believe in, knowing that the consequences could be fatal. Though they have passed away, their voices have not. From the words of Sophia Scholl, we will not be silenced.